Good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode number 23 of the Granite Cornerstone podcast. We are so happy to have you here with us this evening. Tonight, we are going to be discussing the topic of Masonic widows or special ladies. Joining me this evening, we have Brother John Glover. John, how are you?
I'm doing great, Tim. How are you doing?
Doing very well, thanks. Also joining us this evening is Scott Newberry. Scott, how are you?
Good. How you doing, Tim?
Doing very well. Chris Busby was going to join us this evening, but he is driving home from Ohio, where he was presenting on Masonic ritual. So you've got just the three of us again this evening. So I hope that's enough for you. But here we go. So we're here to talk about special ladies, Masonic widows. So before we get into this, let's do what we always do and set the stage for our audience. Who are we talking about?
I'll let you go, John.
Oh, thanks, Scott. So special ladies, we always have to explain that to our new brethren. It's not a term that comes naturally, but it refers to any widow of a brother who has passed on to the celestial lodge above.
And so specifically, we're talking about our widows. Obviously, that is in the title of tonight's episode, Masonic Widows. And one of the things that we are obligated to do is to help aid and assist those widows after a brother has passed. You know, very often we say that the last service we can perform for a brother is to give them a Masonic funeral. But, for most of our brothers, those who are married and survived by a spouse, we have some extra service that we can provide them. So, Scott, why don't you tell us a little bit about what it is, specifically within the jurisdiction of New Hampshire, but generally what's done for special ladies?
So I think the for most the big thing is outreach. What I'll go back to when I was a kid. One of the big things we used to do is we used to look at after shut-ins. Those people who can't necessarily get out to do grocery shopping, take care of their property, shovel out when it snows up here in New England. Not as much as it used to, but I think that's where a lot of it comes from. It's the service to the widow is what most of us will think about when we go ahead and talk about our special ladies. Reaching out by phone, dropping by, letting them know that there are people who are interested and want to make sure that they're taken care of, make sure that they get what they need. Sometimes it's just as simple as a quick phone call, 5 or 10 minutes. They want to just talk to somebody, check in with them. Sometimes it's, like I said, showing up and plowing a driveway or, picking up groceries for them at the grocery store. I don't know about you guys, but if you do Instacart and DoorDash, it gets really expensive on the fees these days. So just being able to swing by and pick a few things up at the grocery store is a big help for a lot of them.
Yep, I think that's certainly something we can do. John, I know you've talked about this a little bit, and
Mm-hmm.
I know your lodge is the what is it? The Center of New Hampshire Masonry, right?
Oh, the center of the Masonic universe.
Oh, excuse me, the center of the whole Masonic universe.
Yes.
Excellent. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your sitting master? What does your lodge do for special ladies?
What we do, and we've been doing this certainly for as long as I've been a Mason there, and I know it goes back a long time. We always hold. Well, we do. The lodge does programs for special ladies, and individual brethren do whatever is needed for special ladies. So from the individual brethren's perspective, it's like what Scott was just talking about. There's shut-ins that are taken care of, usually kind of errand running things, picking up medications when they need to be picked up, delivering mail, clearing out driveways, that sort of thing. They tend to be done by brothers who are close to the family, though, or had always been close to the family, either geographically or emotionally. At the lodge level, we send out poinsettias every year for Christmas. We send cards. We do hold a joint veterans and special ladies program where we individually recognize every one of our ladies. At the moment, we're blessed to have a secretary who is a local boy, and all the special ladies who tend to participate in that are also local, so he knows them all very well and knew their husbands, and so he is able to go around to each one of them and talk about them in great detail, and I wasn't say bring them to life because they're obviously alive, but it paints them as an individual and not just you're a widow, so we have to take care of you. No, this is a real person who is an individual.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Scott, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think that's where I think in some cases it's there's a disconnect because it's that individual who knows the other individual versus the I have to reach out because they're part of this, and I hate to use the term category of individuals that the lodge knows. It's like, well, we need to reach out to DMLA, reach out to Rainbow, we're going to reach out to our widows, and it kind of separates them. It doesn't make them as personable as what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the things that's really interesting about the widows, right? We talked about this a little bit in our prep call, but really there is generally a pretty significant generational separation between the active members of a lodge and a lot of these ladies, sometimes because of the nature of death. Really, I mean, a lot of these people are widows of Masons who were active many, many years ago, may not have been active recently, so we may not necessarily have relationships with them. How do we even know who our special ladies are? I mean, John, you've got an excellent example where your secretary is in there and sort of knows these people intimately and probably knows their spouses who have passed. But I know, in my lodge, our secretary is a relatively new Mason, and our master obviously is relatively fresh. Our entire line is not past masters. So how do we identify these people? How do we find out about them? How do we connect with them? That was one of the challenges I had as a master, certainly, was trying to figure that part out.
I don't know. Speaking for myself yes, I'm a sitting master, but I'm a relatively young Mason. I've only been a Mason 9 years. And I'm no spring chicken, but I'm also not part of that special ladies generation. I feel that same kind of awkwardness that you just expressed. Most of the special ladies in my lodge, I don't know personally. And certainly I didn't know their husbands. They're all, dead before I came in even. We have had a couple since I became a Mason, regretfully, but that's natural. I've seen some brothers seem to have a more natural affinity to get to know them. Some of them I've discovered they've gotten to know them through like Eastern Star, for example, which is a way to connect. Others just, it seems to come more naturally. But it can certainly be a challenge.
Scott, you are not a young Mason. I don't mean that to say that you're old, but you've been in the fraternity longer than John and I combined, I believe.
I'm coming up on 23 years.
Okay, so yeah, just about. What are your thoughts on this? You've got a history with a lot of people. Obviously, you've met a lot of these guys over the last 23 years whose wives you may have met. How do the lodges with younger members, younger masters, younger active members find out who these special ladies are?
So it's interesting that we touch on this because while I'm definitely in the older section of the Masonic age, chronologically age speaking, I'm not in that generation, which typically you see with the special ladies. So it kind of gives me a different perspective on things, especially when I look at lodges today. John, you mentioned that you're only 9 years in the fraternity. Typically we look at our wardens, either a junior warden or senior warden, to work with our special ladies. And my own lodge, we're going to be having young men go through as wardens, in their mid-20s. So now you've added an extra couple of decades of distance between age-wise. So really, and there's no way that they actually knew these individuals personally. So at that point, it becomes, unfortunately, on the heads of the secretary. You need to follow up with your members. You need to know who your members are. And when they pass away, hopefully you have the information about their wives or their significant others, or whatever term you'd like to use at this point in time. I know that from my own experience, I did not always know those individuals. And in some cases, I didn't even know the brother had passed away until, it came time to say, hey, look, you haven't paid your dues in a couple of years. What's going on? So it's really tough to make sure that you keep track of who these special ladies are. And once you know a brother has a significant other, then it behooves the secretary, and thankfully our Grandview system has a spot for it now. Um, you have to keep track of who those people are, and then you have to understand that it behooves you to keep track of them. Reach out like John, like you said, your lodge does. Cards and poinsettias and invites them to events, so you actually understand who they are and get to know them a little bit. But a lot of that falls on the secretary or whoever your special ladies program person is, assuming you have a program around your Masonic widows and such. But it's like trying to keep track of your membership. It's the same type of thing, but a different category.
So I'm a relatively 14 years a Mason. John's 9 years a Mason. Scott, again,
The old guy.
as long as the two of us here. In my experience, wives tend to be relatively active now in Masonry. We have a lot more ladies at the table. We have a lot more wives getting involved in, I don't want to say the business of the lodge, but we certainly lean on our spouses a lot more. And they're generally, in my opinion, more visible now than they were 14 years ago when I joined the lodge. So, Scott, I think we're going to lean on you for your wisdom.
Oh boy, we're in trouble now.
Wisdom and experience, we're going to call it.
Start calling him Grandpa.
How about we just go with experience, not wisdom?
Okay, I think everyone watching and participating can agree with that. How active were these ladies possibly, when their husbands were around?
Well, whether it's good or bad, I've had some different experiences than you've necessarily seen, Tim, because I've seen lodges where you never see a wife at all. They're not involved with the fraternity. They're not interested in being involved with the fraternity. Then I've seen other ones like you've seen, Tim, where there's a ladies at the table. Seems like every year, and you get all the wives there, and they're participating and they're active. It's interesting because I don't remember when I was a kid, and of course we've touched on this before. I grew up in a Masonic family. I don't remember a lot of events where my mother and father went to an event together unless it was a public event, the installation or a Christmas event or something like that at the lodge. I think the active wives in the fraternity is more of a more recent impact. I do know that there are plenty of wives over the years that have been very active, especially those that got involved with the Eastern Star. You see them a lot more frequently. But it's hard because you don't necessarily see all the wives that you'd like to see. You don't know what's going on. I mean, I know plenty of brothers who are married and you never see their wife. They never even mention their wife. The only reason why they're married is because they're wearing a wedding band. So it's there's a very widespread as far as activity from the wives go. And I also think that one of the things that we don't take into account here is, and I really hate to say this, but there's a divorce rate out there that, all of a sudden the wife may no longer be interested anymore because, they're no longer together. So how do we handle those? It's all part of that whole, the only thing you can do is you can reach out and invite them and make them welcome and then see who wants to come around. You should never force a wife to show up to events, but hopefully you can at least keep them involved. If the lodge is doing birthday cards, make sure you include the wives into that. If you're sending Christmas cards or poinsettias to families as opposed to just the special ladies we have, then go ahead and make sure you address it to the wife as well as the husband. So
I think you bring up an interesting question. So let's talk about this. And John, we'll go to you first with this one. Wives versus widows, right? We tend to invite the special ladies out, which is our term for widows, to events that are tailored for them. But generally, that's the sort of thing that we also invite our wives out to. How do we make those events special for those individuals who are no longer connected to the fraternity through marriage, but only through, the death of a husband?
That's very tough. Of course, what immediately springs to mind is our own special ladies program that we do, where we individually call them out. And it's our annual way to recognize them and bring back some memories of their husbands who are gone, and to thank them for the time that they allowed us to spend with their husbands. And it's a public event, obviously, so we invite everybody to come, current wives, kids, and whatnot. And we make sure to remind everyone that all family is special and whatnot, but it's a special time to remember those widows who made the sacrifice. To do an event like, say, I was going to say the Special Ladies Cruise. I never participated in that, so I don't necessarily want to use that as an example. But to use a Ladies at the Table Lodge, perhaps, where obviously you're going to invite special ladies, but also wives. I'm not sure how you can make it specifically tailored to the special ladies without excluding the wives. I don't know. It's just real. I'm dying here.
No, because listen, as a past master and as somebody who came into that role relatively young in age, I didn't know how to have a lot of the conversations that I would say are necessary to have with widows in their 70s or 80s.
Yeah,
And
take a step further, Tim. We've got brothers now in the fraternity that are joining in their early 20s, their mid 20s. So, I mean, there's another 10-year difference because you came in probably in your 30s.
I came in my 20s, but I was master by 33, I think. So yeah.
Right. So I mean, you've got brothers that are, it's a challenge. I mean, you invite your special ladies in and you're introducing, members of the lodge to them. It's like, put a 22-year-old in front of a 70-year-old, and it's a big difference.
It is. And Dave Ackridge has some interesting comments here that he's just shared with us. Starting the special ladies relationship at the funeral. He mentions his lodge has a broken column ceremony where they get presented a pin. I know that's something that we talked about on our prep call. It's not something I've seen before, but
St. John's does that as well.
Okay. Obviously, I think I don't want to say it's easier when it's somebody who's died recently, right? But how do we start that relationship up again? Because if you go to Larry Sprague, right, who is generally responsible for the Special Ladies program from a Grand Lodge perspective, I'm sure he would share with you, and I don't want to speak for him, but I will say the participation in the Special Ladies Award that Grand Lodge offers is relatively low. I think that's pretty well known.
Well, I think that's it's potentially a misnomer, because while participation in the program from a Grand Lodge level is low, meaning there are a few lodges that actually submit for the award, and I only know this because I was a district deputy for several years. You look at who's actually putting the paperwork in to be considered for the award. I have to believe that there's a great many more Masons and lodges out there that are participating. They're just not looking for the recognition.
Yeah. Well, and that's something I actually struggled with myself this year as master, is as the deadline was approaching to apply for that award, questioning, because I do not have the sense that we do enough for special ladies. We always should be doing more.
I agree with you on that entirely.
And it just, it feels kind of, there's a good word for this, and it escapes me at the moment, but let's just say it awkward. It feels awkward to be applying for an award. Yay, look what we did for our special ladies. Yeah, we could have done more, but look what we did.
It's a little self-aggrandizing.
Well, and the other part of it too is that it's part of our obligation to take care of them.
Right.
So I mean, we're asking to be recognized and awarded as being best in the jurisdiction for something that we should be doing anyway.
It's like the Major General John Sullivan Award. You don't give it to someone who does the job of the office they're in. You give it to someone for going far above and beyond their obligation, effectively.
And yeah, so are we necessarily looking at lodges, or are any lodges really there? I know there's a few, but how many lodges are really going far above and beyond what they should be doing for their special ladies? I do like the point that Right Worshipful Brother Ackridge just made, which is in applying, you are sharing best practices, which is, I think, a very important aspect of that award that we probably
Could do
that I
better.
certainly didn't think about.
And that's actually what pushed me over the edge, was to share what we do, because I have heard certain things that other lodges do, like, oh, hey, that's a great idea, or wow, that sounds like a great idea for the lodge, a lodge in that particular situation. Wouldn't necessarily apply to my lodge, but share the ideas.
Yeah, and again, it's such a it's a hard question to answer, right? We're given very vague instructions as to what we're supposed to do, right? It's help, aid, and assist, right? That's what we're supposed to do. What are the boundaries of that assistance or that help? Where do we, what is above and beyond? We don't really have a definition for that. Are we supposed to just make an outreach, make sure that their driveway is shoveled? Are we supposed to do more than that? And how do we identify that as our responsibility? Because I think that's something we don't really talk about, is what is the bare minimum, right? And what is above and beyond?
Well, I would think the bare minimum would be reaching out once a year and saying, "Hey, how you doing?"
Yep.
I hate to set a low bar, but I mean, I would think at the very least that's what we should be doing.
That's fair.
But as far as what's above and beyond,
I don't think you can. I don't think there's no ceiling.
I don't think there is.
No, I agree with that. Absolutely, I agree with that. But what is standard practice? What should be the bare minimum? What should be the basic that every lodge is doing? And then what defines going above and beyond? And John, I think if you're invited into an event every year, you may not feel that's above and beyond, but I'm sure there's a lot of lodges that certainly don't go that far. So
Well, no, and I really appreciate what the committee that evaluates all the applications does by recognizing lodges that they're not necessarily looking for the lodge that did more than every other lodge. They're looking for the lodge that perhaps did so much more than they had done in the past, or did something really new and interesting, or even if it was just took care of a single special lady in dire circumstances in a way that just truly exemplifies what it means to be a Mason, and deserves to be called out for that. Okay, so a lodge that was rolling in money took 50 special ladies to a cruise. That's wonderful, but another lodge that's barely scraping enough together managed to keep a special lady in her home by paying her rent. I don't know, I'm just kind of making this up off the top of my head.
But those are equally laudable acts when you consider the resources available.
Exactly.
So the point, one of the things I wanted to bring up when I brought this whole thing up before we started kind of getting into what lodges do, is there are certainly lodges that don't do enough. There are probably lodges that don't do anything, right? And I know I've seen lodges that don't have an active special ladies program. I think at some point in time, mine was a lodge that didn't really focus on it, and that's been reignited recently. But how do you, as a lodge, kind of fix that problem? If you've got a special ladies program that has just fallen off, you haven't done anything for years and years and years, and you've lost contact, right? You don't even know who these special ladies are at all. You don't know if the special ladies are alive. So now you've got to go look that up. How do you reignite a program like that?
Personally, I think that starts with individual outreach. Just who are they right out of the gate? I know at Horse Chase, we have somewhere between 40 and 50 special ladies on the books, as it were.
That is a lot.
We have around 200 members on the books as well. Some of the special ladies that we have now, we recently inherited from Harris Lodge because of the merger.
Okay.
But the ladies that come to our special ladies program, we're happy if we get 10.
Yeah.
So we get a 20th of them. So the rest of them are just kind of out there. Now, there's a handful that I know that it's not their thing. They have their individual contacts. And it's another point that we made before. Each of these ladies are different, but particularly, say, if you're a small lodge with no active program, and you want to get it going again, I couldn't see saying, "Yay, we're gonna hold a special ladies program. We're gonna send invitations out and hope for the best." I'd be surprised if anybody showed up. But if you at least started out by just reaching out to those ladies, it's no different than, to me at least, than reaching out to those brothers that you haven't seen in forever. Reach out to them, see how they are, reintroduce yourself, see if there's anything they need, float the idea of wanting to be able to do something, hold an event to be able to recognize them. Because I think there are definitely two sides to it. There's what I personally classify as more the obligation side, the help, aid, and assist. And that has almost always got to be on an individual level. What can we do for you specifically? But the other side is for the lodge or the brethren as a whole to be able to thank those ladies, and recognize them for, like I said before, for allowing us to spend time with their husbands. And that, I think, is done. It can be done at an individual level, but I think it's at least in my experience, works better at a lodge level, because then the whole lodge is there. You've got multiple generations. You can do something bigger.
But I think if you're going from a standing stop, where you have no program at all, I think, just I was kind of rolling the idea through my head as we're talking about it here. Just start with one. Pick an individual who you believe is still around. Because let's face it, we lose touch with our special ladies. They may no longer be with us, but pick one, reach out, and work from that response. Because a lot of these ladies, at least the ones that I've talked to over the years, know the other ones. So, hey, I'm talking to Betty. She happens to know Joan. She knows Joan's still around. So now you can reach out to both of them and say, okay, and kind of grassroots it up from there. But you need someone in the lodge to take ownership. The lodge just can't say, we're going to do a special ladies event.
Yeah.
Without actually knowing who the special ladies are, where they're located. I know of a couple of our own special ladies from my own lodge. They don't live in the area. And if you said, hey, we're going to do a special ladies event in 3 months, maybe come, because it gives them time to make arrangements to come up on for the trip. But some of them, you're talking, 1,000 miles. That's not a hop, skip, and a jump, so to speak.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think that, if you're working from no program, active program at all, you just can't say we're going to do a specialized program. To your point, John, you just can't go from 0 to 100 in this kind of situation. I think you really have to build it up from the ground up. Just start one brother, or a couple brothers and a couple of ladies that you feel are good outreaches, and start from there.
I like that. So I kind of want to change the topic of conversation a little bit. We've talked a lot about special ladies and sort of what we do as a lodge. I want to talk about something that may be a little bit more controversial and really talk about what we're calling. And I know we had this conversation very little bit on the prep call, but special ladies is a term that, if you don't know what it is, doesn't necessarily tell you what it is, right? And in a lot of ways, I don't know that it's necessarily the best name for this program. So what I don't even know where I want to go with this, but
I think Tim, where you're trying to go with it is that when all of these programs started and all the recognition started for our Masonic widows, the term special ladies came up. Whoever thought it up. The challenge is that, just like we have with new Masons coming through the door, if you take a look, and we did it on our pre-call, we all took a look at it, we hit the infamous Google search, and it's not a term that's accepted across the board. Not everybody calls these individuals special ladies. And it makes it a challenge, because when we say special lady, who do we actually mean by a special lady? I know a lot of us, and correct me if I'm wrong, would call our wives special ladies even before we're gone.
If I don't, she'll hurt me. So yes.
I mean, special ladies could also be our daughters. I mean, they are special to us. So, I mean, it's a challenge because it requires education on every front in order to understand who they are. I mean, admittedly, Masonic widows is a tough term, because while most people would say, yep, that's the wife of a Mason who's passed away, I know I've heard more than a few times, maybe not recently, but for a long time there, the term Masonic widow was also applied to a wife that was still with us because she never saw her husband because he was at Masonic events 7 days a week.
Yeah, my wife uses
So,
that term liberally.
Yeah.
I mean, mine not so much now. I'm not out as much as I used to be, but it's a challenge to, you don't really want to label anybody. I mean, that's the thing is, but you need to have something to kind of, plant the flag around, as far as the, to gather around that flag when you go to try and put together a program or something.
Well, and again, I think it's already awkward enough to recognize this group in any way, because really, for a lot of these ladies, you're highlighting them because of the worst thing they ever experienced in their life, right? So calling them Masonic widows really just highlights the reason they're there is because they've lost their husband. So I think that is a tough term to use for a lot of reasons. But special ladies is a term that is kind of, it's certainly antiquated, but let's talk about a subject that, has come up in my mind before. We have brothers in this jurisdiction who are openly gay. They are in long-term committed relationships. Some of them may be married. And I think we're getting to a point, certainly as we get older in this generation, we're going to find a lot of Masonic widows are not ladies anymore. How do we include them in a way that isn't excluding them based on their gender? How do we include them in a way that creates events that are for them? I mean, inviting a bunch of males widows, right, to ladies at the table is fine, but again, you're inviting the special ladies or the widows or whatever you want to call them to a ladies at the table because it's open to ladies. How do we create a system or a term or anything that acknowledges the existence of these relationships, the legitimacy of these relationships, and be inclusive to these individuals? Because I think special ladies is a term that is already excluding a fair number of our brothers for no reason.
Well, the good news is, I think, functionally what we do, while it's obviously tailored to ladies in terms of, like, for example, at our special ladies program, we provide little gift bags, which are geared toward ladies of a particular generation.
Sure.
It wouldn't take much to tweak it in order to make it so everyone who is there is taken care of appropriately. The term is what's really tough to change.
Yep.
On the one hand, I like Masonic widows because it leaves, there's no ambiguity at all.
You're right.
But it is a bit morbid and can kind of pick at the scab, as you put it. Though, let's be honest, that is why they're there at a special ladies program. We are acknowledging the fact that they are the widow of a brother. I don't have a good solution. I mean, we talked about this at length.
It's also a difficult position because this will become less so as our older generation, passes away. But there's a fair number of individuals out there who, don't even want to acknowledge the fact that we have, gay brothers.
Yeah.
They don't want to be associated with them. They don't want to be involved with them.
I mean, there are entire grand jurisdictions that have those beliefs.
Oh, I understand that. And that's one of the things that, unfortunately comes into play. You want to be inclusive. You want to have everybody there, and naming aside, there will be people who now you have in a lodge room who, we're supposed to be there's supposed to be harmony in a lodge room, and you get a possibility of having a very disharmonious situation, and not because of any one individual's fault per se, but because of social norms from generations. This is the way we were brought up. This is the way it's supposed to be. To people who just don't understand the differences and don't want to accept the differences. It's very difficult for a lot of people to come to grips with that stuff. But as far as naming goes, what are you going to do? Special spouses? It's just there's no real good easy way to relabel the program without giving it some good in-depth thought.
Yeah, and again, I think Masonic Widows is probably the most apt description because nobody is going to sit there and lodge a new Master Mason or an EA sitting at a stated meeting. Nobody's going to ask me what Masonic Widows means. I've been asked what a special lady is more times than I can count because, again, to what you said, Scott, our daughters are special, our wives are special, all of these people are special to us.
Well, it's actually and I realize this is going to slide off course a little bit, but it's systematic of some of the naming conventions we have. Masonic veterans, we call it a veterans program, but it's for our Masonic veterans, not necessarily our military veterans. And that's a big disconnect in a lot of cases because people don't see the difference between the two. Typically, we roll it all together and we recognize everybody at the same time that has that veteran status, but they mean two very different things.
That one I will say has also been very confusing before.
Yes.
I've got a lot of people who are military veterans who are wondering why a Masonic Veterans Program doesn't recognize them, and I think that's a very good point. There are definitely some terms out there.
So let's jot that down for future episodes. So, having grown up as the son of a veteran, I totally understand the thought processes. So, but yeah, with what we're dealing with tonight, it's hard to say this is what you should call the program because the program's going to continue to morph and change, and hanging on to, as you said, Tim, an antiquated term may not necessarily be the best thing for everybody involved, especially where we've got a lot of new folks, a lot of first generations Masons coming in. They don't have any Masonic ties when they come in. They have no idea what any of these terms mean.
Yeah, and again, even antiquated is one thing. Specifically exclusive of individuals is one of the things that I think bothers me more than anything. But,
well, it's exclusive in two directions because the term ladies excludes male spouses right out of the gate, as you called out, Tim. But it also means that you're saying that only the widows are special. Wives aren't special. Mothers aren't special. Daughters aren't special. Well, they are. Well, so why can't we call them special?
You've also got, unfortunately, you have another connotation that you have to worry about, and that's because special has been used in the past to label those individuals that need extra assistance. Special education comes to mind right off the top of my head. It's unfortunate that could easily be confused in that perspective as well. So, I mean, there's a lot here to try and unpack and straighten out and figure out. And, obviously it's not something the three of us are going to be able to solve tonight. And, we probably should definitely make sure that everybody understands that these are our opinions and not the opinions of our Grand Lodge.
Absolutely.
And I think that's one of the challenges we have is that, you've got to, in order to make a change here, you have to understand what's going on. You have to understand what the original intent was, and then go from there. Is there something that we can substitute that might make it a little easier and cleaner for someone to understand, or is it just something that we're just going to have to live with because there's no option?
Nope, I think that's fair.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like I don't think we're going to solve anything. I think I just wanted to bring it up more so that we have the conversation.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I think, Tim, when we started this many, many moons ago, was the whole purpose of the podcast was not just to provide some education, but also start the conversations, and hopefully brothers that have listened to this either live or on replay get that opportunity to kind of bring up the conversation in their own lodges.
Yeah, so one of the other things that came up a little bit earlier that I want to talk about again, very briefly, is we talk about widows a lot. We talk about it in our ritual, but always appended to that is orphans. I know that's not the topic of conversation tonight, but generally we tend to put them right next to each other in every conversation we have. I can't remember the last time we've talked about Masonic orphans in the sense of a Mason who has died, who's left children behind with or without a wife. But what is that? Has anybody heard of anything being done for the children of our brothers who passed?
Other than, well, specific examples where there was a definite need that was met, no. That said, particularly at any funeral, and this is what I mentally classify as part of that individual outreach. Just like we reach out to the special lady if she's there, but it all the family, but particularly the widow and the the orphans, the children left behind, whether they're grown or not. It's the here's our contact info. If there's anything we can do for you, please, don't hesitate to reach out, and perhaps even continuing to reach out for a period of time. I think, Scott, you mentioned at our prep call that the usual kind of almost mutual grieving time is about 6 months or so, and that kind of wears off at that point.
Yeah, there's a tendency, and this seems to be, it's not specific to the topic we've got tonight. It's not specific to Masonic lodges. It's indicative of how society seems to work is,
right.
After a certain period of time, usually somewhere between 6 and 12 months, all of the outreach about, someone who's passed away. We even see this happen. I've seen it happen with people who are injured and need help. That first couple of months, everybody shows up. There's this big outpour, and then it gradually fades off. And it's like, whether the need's still there or not, it's just, we're all kind of worn out. We've all kind of moved on. There's the next new crisis to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the challenges we have, is that ongoing, and that goes back to, like what you said, John, earlier, where there's, something you guys do every Christmas, you do something, and, there's always like a birthday card that goes out. So there's constant touch points, and it just not the immediate need when it happens. And I think part of the reason why we don't see too much about orphans is most of the brothers we're losing right now are in the later stages of their lives. Their kids are all grown, and in some cases their grandchildren are grown.
Yeah.
So there isn't a youth component for a lot of these brothers when they pass away. I can only think of, in my own experience, for funerals that I've actually gone to and attended that are Masonic, I can only think of one where the brother might have had kids at the age where there may have been a need for the kids, but the vast majority, it's the children are already adults. In fact, some of them have already started their families.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, and I think one of the things I've thought about since our prep call and sort of since we've been talking about this a little bit is, generally, if a guy dies at an age where he's got younger kids, it comes as much more of a surprise, and the reaction tends to be a little bit more visceral anyway.
Yeah.
Where
Right.
John, I think you mentioned this. You've got your senior deacon who's got younger children. If something were to happen to him, everybody would be there anyway,
Right.
because of the drasticness of that situation, because of the place that they're in. But I know there are potentially guys that may not be as active as potentially a senior deacon who may pass that we don't get to. We don't necessarily get that involvement with their kids.
But
so it's just something to think about that I haven't really seen before.
Well, the other thing too is that I think one of the challenges is that the way most people look at the term orphan
Yep.
isn't what it was when our obligations were written. Today, most of us think an orphan is a child without any parents. And if you look back at some of the older definitions, and even if you look at the current definition, if you go read a little further into it, it's loss of either parent makes them technically an orphan.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that, because I would never have considered a Masonic orphan, when we say widows and orphans, to be a child whose both parents have died in presumably some sort of horrible accident.
Right, but that's typically how we look at an orphan. An orphan has no parents.
Yeah, it's weird that I've never considered it that way, but that is the traditional definition. That is certainly the way I'd refer to it outside of Masonry.
Right,
but that's very interesting.
But if you do a little digging, you'll find that losing a father would technically make you an orphan, even if your mother's still alive. You're technically an orphan.
I blame Annie.
Absolutely,
Annie, Oliver. That's what I was thinking of.
Oh, Oliver, that's a good one. Yeah, no, and I think there's Dave Ackridge made an interesting point in. Was it Dave? Yeah, historically, orphans were supported by the lodge.
Mm-hmm.
This whole concept is something that, you think about it, it makes sense because we're a supportive fraternal social organization and we want to make sure that it's taken care of. But this is something that has very strong roots in the history of the guild system, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Taking care of widows and orphans, even in today's labor unions, right? Paying pensions to widows. This is something that has really strong historical roots in those stonemasons guilds, for example, that we talk about. It's really interesting to think about that.
Well, I mean, it's not just the guild systems. I mean, even today's modern military. My mother still got benefits when my father passed away through the military.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
we talked about this a little bit. So many of our modern Masonic traditions are more military traditions that we've sort of adapted than anything else.
John's gone quiet.
No, I'm liking the conversation. I mean, you're kind of stealing all my thunder because I was thinking of the guilds and pensions. I was thinking of my father-in-law who he lived in Greece, and after he died, his pension went to his wife, and if when she goes, my wife will still be entitled to a portion of that, even though she's in her 50s now.
That is remarkable.
Yeah, it's from an old Greek unionized pension system, actually sort of through the government, which I'm not even sure exists anymore, but it's been sort of grandfathered. But we recognize that in our obligations still, and we individually certainly respond to that on the individual level when a brother dies, at the time of the funeral, and certainly obviously in the best cases, we keep the relationships going with the individual family members. We don't, though. We don't hold programs, though, like we're going to have a special orphans program.
No,
that just sounds horrible.
Oh, God, yeah,
and how would you keep track of them? I saw a comment earlier. There was a widow and a daughter who kind of got lumped together as a package, so to speak. And I think that's actually a great idea if that happens to work in a circumstance. If you've got an out-of-town family that's got a wife and 6 kids and 12 grandkids, it starts to get a little unwieldy.
That is true.
No, but I mean, if you think about a situation like that, it maybe the assistance that the lodge provides at that point isn't direct. It's more of a, hey, let us help you work with the other area groups, the other area programs, so that you can get the assistance you need. It becomes more of an aid from that perspective than a direct aid from the lodge.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that gets overlooked in a lot of these cases where, oh, well, this individual needs this help. Well, the lodge can give maybe an immediate, we can take care of it right now. We'll get you over the hump. But long term, we need to help you out. Like a good example would be, in the middle of the winter, I'm out of oil.
Yeah.
So the lodge says, hey, look, we'll let me call up. We'll get you 100 gallons of oil so you can stay warm and you have your hot water. But obviously, is there an actual need for heating assistance going forward? If there is, let's get you in contact with the right people to help you out. So that there's a longer term solution for the individual. I think that's one of the things that we overlook a lot when we start talking about helping, not just our special ladies, but others. It's like, what other programs are out there that we can take advantage of? And that I realize takes a lot of, education on our own parts to figure out what they could reach out to. But it's something that I don't think we necessarily look at, helping a special lady maintain heat through the winter. Yet can the lodge afford to foot the oil bill all winter? Maybe, maybe not. Depends on the lodge. But can they put her in contact and help her over the rough spots of getting the assistance she needs? That, in my book, that's just as good. I mean, because
Totally.
we're taking care of her. We're helping her. In some cases, navigate some pretty heady waters when you deal with government agencies. But it's something that I think we should take a look at, as well as for not just the wives, but also the kids too. I mean, I'm looking here, and I'm going to steal from you, Tim. Dave Ackridge mentioned scholarships for assistance in education.
I just noticed that.
It's just one of the aspects, and there's a lot of them out there. But there's a lot of good programs, not just in the fraternity, but even outside of the fraternity, that can help not just with education, but other things that they might need. The heating assistance, the electric assistance, home rental assistance. There's lots of things out there. It's just a question of where those programs are and who knows what they are and who do you put them in contact with.
And maybe you're right. Maybe the lodge just needs to learn more about those resources in their local, their small community, and figure out what that is, and just be available to share those resources. That alone is when somebody is grieving, is a huge help. So I think that's an excellent point that I certainly would never have considered, Scott. So I'm glad you brought that up.
You're
This
welcome,
is why you
Tim.
should be master again, Scott.
All in favor?
Wait, whoa, back up.
I saw your hand up, Scott. You voted for it yourself.
I'll be honest with you, Tim, and we're not supposed to talk ballots, but I abstained the year I was actually elected master. So it was not a unanimous vote.
I think this has been a good conversation, and I really appreciate the engagement from the audience. We've got a little bit of a small audience today. Mostly my own fault for not getting the right communication out there about tonight's episode, but I appreciate those of you who did join us. Before we sign off, I just want to go around, ask if there's any final comments. We'll start with you, Scott.
Well, from where I'm sitting, I think the biggest thing is that whether you have a program or not, there's always the opportunity to start one. And like I said earlier, start small. Just get pick a brother who has passed away, reach out to their widow, and just introduce yourself, say hello, and just so they know that someone's thinking of them. You don't have to necessarily offer assistance. You don't necessarily have to ask right away what they might need. Just the fact that they know that someone's thinking about them means a world of difference to a lot of these people. So I would say that's my suggestion. If you don't have something, start small. And if you have a program, ask the person who's in charge of your program, is there one of these ladies I can reach out to help, just to say hello?
Nope. I like that. And I think that, just to piggyback on that real quick, Scott, and John, you brought this up earlier, we do a lot of individual outreach that we don't consider lodge special ladies outreach, but we should. Those brothers who are out there doing those things, they may not be doing it for the accolades. They may not be doing it for the recognition, but they're doing it because they're Masons, because they're members of your lodge. And I think that's a very important recognition that they deserve, whether they tell us about it or not. The lodge should make every effort to recognize as part of their special ladies what those individuals are doing. Just something I was thinking about. John, any final thoughts?
Actually, I had a little brainstorm even, kind of piggybacking a bit on what Scott said. It doesn't necessarily relate to trying to start a program if you don't have one, but looking ahead to future special ladies, kind of start early. I'm not saying necessarily circumvent the brother and reach out to his wife, but as much as is appropriate, include the wives, because the longer that they feel part of the fraternity themselves, I think the more likely they are to be an active special lady when that time comes. Honestly, I kind of like it when I see all the special ladies show up. I wish we had more, and I think you're never going to get all of them, but if they just feel like they're, that we are part of their family, even from day one, when their husband was made a Mason, then they're going to continue to be part of that family, and not wait until Joe dies to reach out to them and say, oh, well, he's gone now. Now we're your surrogate husbands. Make that relationship early.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think that's a really important point and something we probably don't think about. We don't want to think about our brothers passing away, but we know those who are, a little bit older may not be in the best of health. And even then, even before they get to a point where they may be failing in health, we know who our brothers are, and we should be inviting wives and getting people more involved to start building that relationship early. That's excellent. One thing I assume he's piggybacking a little bit on what Scott said about local resources. John Bertosic in the chat brought up veterans resources. A lot of those guys that we have passing away now certainly have served their country, and there's a lot of red tape to deal with the VA. And to John's point, we've got a lot of brothers who have knowledge and expertise with that can help. So that's another excellent way to just help. You don't have to write a check if you can get them the right resources, whether they're monetary or just help they need to find them. I think that's great. This has been an excellent conversation. I appreciate you both for joining me. I will say to our audience, thank you so much. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please do not hesitate to reach out to us at Granite Cornerstone at nhgrandlodge.org. We really want to hear from you, hear what you find interesting. The email address is on your screen if you're watching us. We will be back next month on Memorial Day, which is the 28th of May. And we will be talking about a topic I'm very excited about, which is our unsung heroes in Lodge. And that's those Lodge officers that do so much for us, but don't tend to get the recognition I think they deserve, specifically your Tyler, your chaplain, and your marshal. And Chris Busby, if you're listening, which I know you will be because you have to edit this podcast to upload it, you better be here for that because I know you've got a lot of thoughts, especially on that marshal and their role in ritual. So hopefully we'll see you then, May 28th at 7:30 p.m. We will make sure to get that communication out early. And thank you everyone for joining us. You've been a great audience tonight, and we really appreciate the engagement. Have a good night, all.